Welcome back to your Friday episode here on Moaning's IGTV, guys. So, we've officially moved on from the pre-Socratic title, but I've decided to extend this series a little bit further than I thought I was going to, because I do feel like it's important to probably just get into Plato and Aristotle for you guys, just so that we kind of understand the movement from pre-Socratics into Plato and Aristotle, and why the two of them, at least we're just going to do the two of them, and why they sort of thought the way that they did, and how philosophy sort of changed and the ideas that changed. So for the Friday episode though, kind of like last week's Sunday episode, it's going to be a very basic sort of introduction to Plato, just so that I can say I've done it. And then for the rest of the weekend and into next weekend even, we're going to be going into more detail about his arguments and the books that he's, the dialogues that he's written. And so we're going to be going into those more so that there's a nice little summary of all of that. Now, before I get into the episode, please do not forget to subscribe to this channel because we have so much exciting stuff that is coming. But today we're going to be talking about the very, very famous Plato. So Plato was probably born in about 428, 427-ish, okay? I say this in every single episode and I'm going to continue to say it, is that you need to take those dates with a grain of salt, okay? There's like 5 years on either side of it. You'll see the dates written differently every single time. That's the ones that I say are the ones that are kind of most commonly thrown about, especially in like the Oxford Dictionary. I do double check what dates are in there first and foremost, just to see what they say, and then I go into my other books. So that is just the most common date, but still 5 years on either side of that date is still okay. So just bear that in mind, that if you decide to say like 425 even, not 525, 425 even, you're okay. Like people will still know that you know what you're talking about, so it's fine. And he supposedly died in about 348, 347-ish. So those are Plato's dates. Those are sort of like, that's the little time frame that we're looking at when we look at Plato. Now he's from Athens, famously from Athens. He was famously a student of Socrates as well. And we know it's because he uses Socrates as like a mouthpiece in all of his dialogue. So that's super important about him. And he's the guy who founded the Academy. The Academy, which is in Athens. You can still go and see it actually, but he founded that school. So that's sort of his like claim to fame. Now the whole root discussion that is mainly in Plato's works is the whole idea of the forms, and that's sort of the platform that he uses to springboard into other arguments throughout all of his works, is this core belief in the forms. So what exactly is a form? A form, for example, with this cup, I always use this cup as an example. This cup, there's a form of the cup, right? So how do I know that this is a cup? Plato says it's because there's a form of the cup. So there's this whole other world that has a form of everything. That has a form of the microphone that I'm using or the camera that I'm using. It has a form of the table. And that's how you know, well, I know a table's a table because I've already seen the form in another world of the table, and therefore I can identify a table, kind of like the cup. There's already form of the cup somewhere else, and so therefore I can identify the cup. Very simply. That was like so simple that academics are going to find that offensive, and I say that a lot, but like truly that was really simple. But like that's essentially what a form is that he claims there's another world that involves all of these forms. But in the same way, he says that there's a form of a cup. He says that there are also forms of like justice and truth. There are forms of those things. So that's how we can identify truth. That's how we can identify justice. It's how we can identify all of these, non-physical ideas, is that because there is a form of those too. Now, this even includes discussions about good and the existence of a soul. So that's sort of where all of those things are rooted, is in the idea of the forms. And that's important because when we discuss his individual works, we'll be going into more detail about those things. So it's important to understand that it all comes from this idea that he thinks everything comes from the world of the forms. Now, Plato's Academy, let's talk about that. So Plato's Academy was built, even, I was about to say was born. What the but it was built in like the 380s BC, and he actually came back to Athens after he had been traveling for a hell of a long time. He was sort of traveling around Greece, and he met a bunch of other philosophical groups. He sort of stayed with them. He tried to learn what they knew, and what they were teaching, and he brought all that back to Athens, and he opened up the academy. So the school is more like a university in the way that we understand universities today. It's more like that. And he incorporated loads of different teachings into the way that he ended up thinking philosophically, because when he was on his travels, he met people who, like, they followed Pythagoras, who we discussed last week, yeah? So if you haven't watched that episode, then you should. He met, those people, whatever, and he brings all that back into a university environment called the Academy in Athens. Now, the existence of the Academy sets up something later for Aristotle, which is super important. We're discussing him in 2 weeks, I think. But it's because the Academy existed that then Aristotle ended up setting up his Lyceum, but we'll talk about that with Aristotle. So this Academy idea, this sort of like ancient university idea, that was very, very new and very, very different and really just designed for philosophical discussion. It was more of like a lifestyle type thing. So you'd have like the gymnasium, you'd have discussion time, it would be like a whole encompassing experience type of education. Now, I think that those are really like the basic points that you guys should know, really focusing on the forms, but I think also probably where you'll know Plato from, which is quite important for you guys. I feel like it's going to be an easy thing for you guys to be like, oh yeah, is that he was depicted in Raphael's School of Athens. So in this painting, which I saw in Rome and I cried. Now, Plato is depicted right in the middle there. He's depicted with Aristotle, who we'll be focusing on when we do Aristotle's introduction episode, but with Plato, he's standing there and he's pointing upwards, which is supposed to be showing that he believes in the world of the forms, the idea of the forms, the world of the forms. So he's like, yeah, everything came from up there. Like, that's why his little hand is pointing upwards. And what's interesting about this piece, and I've said this 100,000 times and everyone else is like, oh, it's not that important. When I say everyone else, I mean my professors at university who sort of told me I was stupid the whole time anyway, so whatever. But they said that this wasn't important, but he's holding the Timaeus, which is one of his works, which is one of the most interesting works and most glossed over works that he wrote, but I will be getting into that later. But just take a note of that, because when we get into Timaeus, I'll be explaining why that's important. He's not holding the Republic, he's not holding Phaedo, he's not holding any of that kind of stuff. He's holding the Timaeus. So that's an important note, which I will be explaining in the future. So yeah, I think those are really the most important things about Plato. Just remember about the idea of the forms. This form of a cup, I know it's a cup because there's a form of a cup somewhere up there in the universe. And that's how I know, and I've seen it before I was born. That's how I know it's a cup, in the same way that's how I know about justice, the same way that I know, and you know, about truth as well. And all Plato's works are dialogue, so when you're reading it, you're reading a conversation between usually Socrates and somebody else. He uses Socrates as a mouthpiece to drive the work forward. So yeah, just remember those things. I always say, just remember that, and I feel like I list like 10 things in an episode for you to remember. But yeah, if you have any questions about the world of the forms, please hold off for the next 2 weeks, because we'll be getting into more detail in all of his writing about what exactly that means. But for the very basic idea, that's really it, as I explained in this episode. So do hold off. We will be getting into more detail, I promise. If after all those episodes do come out, if you still don't get it, if you're still sitting there and you're like, what the does any of this mean, then holler at me, message me, whatever it is that you want to do. You can definitely reach me online some way, somehow. So thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. Cheers. I really, really do appreciate it, because I feel like I've been doing this for ages and only now people are starting to watch. So thank you guys so much, and we'll be seeing you tomorrow with more Plato. So we'll see you then.